start to put tension on my string drawback, I was like, okay, I'm going to switch.
It's him. You can look at the horns when he's dead. I'm in the zone. Let the arrow go is perfect.
So when they lose their front shoulders, that's how you know they're smoking.
Went about 5-10 more yards. He probably went 20 yards total. Tipped over, tried getting back up. And I saw him pull up.
We rushed 4 meters rods that night. We got like 156 and something like that. And then the next day we came up to 163 even.
You're listening to the White Cat Outdoors podcast, bringing you to the table where we talk about the outdoors.
What's going on, guys?
It doesn't work. It's
It
on
does.
A bottle.
It totally
it does,
works.
100%, Tom. You have to.
You got to do it. Come on. Attaboy. Well, while Tom's drinking that, it's episode 88, you said,
It is,
Nick? 88. Yep. We're getting closer and closer to 100. We're getting excited about it. So keep sending in your ideas to us of what you guys want to hear about for the special episode number 100. That wasn't even close, Tom.
It bounced straight off the lip.
It totally didn't. Well, I guess I'm gonna throw it to Nick. What are we doing tonight, Nick? Oh, and Tom's also here. You guys probably heard his voice already, but
Yeah, he was busy drinking.
yeah.
So this has been a rough year for us when it comes to food plots. I think Tom and I, we got a little bit of a two-headed start, and then, which typically would be okay, but we had a really, really, really wet summer in this area, and our food plots did not turn out the way we'd like them to.
July was terrible. It rained
it was
22 days in July.
Freaking spring,
It was
basically.
bad.
Stupid. So anyways, our food plots didn't really turn out the way we wanted to. Our corn was almost a bust. All of our food plots didn't turn out the way we'd like them to. And, typically they are really nice, but just didn't work out. So we wanted to emphasize that just because food plots don't work out doesn't mean you don't have food on your property.
And not to say that our food plots didn't turn out at all. They're just not to White Cat standards.
Exactly. But we still have plenty of food that's naturally on the property. And that's what we're here to talk about tonight, because either you didn't plant food plots this year, which is A-okay, or if you, like us, got a lot of rain and your food plots didn't turn out the way you wanted them to, don't panic, because there's other food sources all over the property you hunt. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today, Frank.
I can't wait to talk about it. It's going to be wild.
I guess we'll just start, because it changes throughout the season. So early season, for me, even if my food plots turn out really good, apples.
I was going to say, I'm a huge apple guy.
Yeah.
All about apples.
So if you are lucky enough to have, crab apple trees, or you have an apple orchard, that's a huge food source for early season. I know right now our apple trees are loaded, which means harsh winter. So if you follow the old almanac.
Yeah.
Tom, do you like apple trees? I know Tom's got plenty of spots where he hunts apples.
Early season archery, big apple guy. And believe it or not, even late season rifle, I'll still go back and hunt the apples. Mid season, not so much. More of an acorn guy. Mid season,
So I haven't done much late season on apples. Do you find like in areas where there's a lot of apples just on the ground underneath the snow, or what?
No, apples still hanging on the tree, because especially if you get a foot or two of snow, that covers all of the food that is on the ground. So they have to start going up, and if there's still apples left on the trees, then I've actually shot a doe. This is 2-3 years ago out of an apple orchard. Watched her eat her last apple, and
At least you let her have her last meal.
yeah, I was kind of thoughtful about it, I guess, but yeah, it was. We had probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet of snow, and all the corn had been cut at this point. And really the only food left was browse and apples. And if there's apples, they're probably going to take apples over browse, because...
Yeah, definitely.
But that's another thing we're going to touch on is browse.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about browse, but a little bit more on apples. We planted a bunch of apple trees up in Clymer, because that's like a food plot, basically, is what you're planting, only it's something you don't have to replant every year. You're going to get those... You have different apple crops every year, but you're going to have apples every year. And when
Yeah.
you plant apples, or if you have crab apples on your property, it's just basically like having another food plot that you don't have to worry about so much.
Really,
every
you
year.
don't maintain it. Like once it's established, it's done.
Yeah, especially like if it's just like old crab apples in the woods, you don't have to do anything at all with that. But if you have an apple orchard,
You'll prune it.
a little
Prune
bit.
it, maybe spray some 7 on it, kill the bugs.
Yeah, but
I
for the
know-
most part, it's a very, very low maintenance food source that you don't have to worry about much.
Yeah. I mean, we're going on 8 years that we've been like driving up to hunt this property, but it's been 15, 20 years since it's been hunted with our family, and we've never done anything with the apple trees that are on
No.
that were already there. And every year,
Yeah.
I think almost every year somebody's killing off of apples, and it's easy work.
Yeah.
Another thing is, what do they say? Deer only care about the ground to what, 12 feet
It's
up?
like 10 to 12, yeah.
10 to 12 feet up. Well, you're not going to find an apple tree much taller than that.
Yeah.
And if I'm not going to say every apple orchard, but most apple orchards are pretty thick themselves with a lot of undergrowth. So they make really good habitat for deer to just hang out in.
Yeah.
So
Scrapes.
yeah,
Holy
a lot of
That's
scrapes.
the best. One of the best places I've found. I like to put cameras on scrapes and apple orchards because, like you said, the branches are so low. There's so many good licking branches. Every tree has a scrape underneath of it.
We have one in particular. What did we count? What, 6 scrapes around? This is like the grandfather
Yeah.
of all crabapple trees.
Yeah, it's huge. It's like
Might be 14 foot.
no, but like
It's very
No, it's a very, I know.
the canopy is
the
enormous.
diameter is
yeah.
huge.
There was 6 scrapes, and they weren't one on top of each other.
Yeah,
They were
spread
spread
out.
out.
It's a huge tree.
yeah, but a lot of scrapes in the rut. But like I
Yeah,
said,
so that's something that brings them to it. Just not even worrying about the food. It's for scrapes, licking branches, and that. It's just the perfect all-around thing.
yeah.
Agreed.
And it's typically pretty thick in and around apple orchards, so deer feel comfortable moving in there during daylight hours. You're not going to have action the last 15 minutes like you would sitting a field edge. You're going to have consistent action. I don't want to say all day long, but
You're more likely to catch them moving a half hour before dark rather than, like you said, on a field edge where they're coming in right at dark. Because back in the woods, wherever you may be, a lot of times not apple orchards, but like crab apple orchards are on the edges of swamps. Mm-hmm. So you'll catch them coming out of the swamp to get into the apples an hour before daylight. They feel perfectly safe in that stuff.
Yeah, because with 2 bounds, they're back into cover.
Yeah.
And that's
What-
what we have are set up with. Almost every apple tree is within 30 yards of the swamp.
Yeah.
All the way around, but you can hunt apples on pretty much any wind, actually, which is nice. Like there's apples all the way. We own 3 sides of the swamp, and there's apples all the way around it, and you can, at any wind, you can hunt them.
Effectively hunt them.
Yeah. What were you saying, Tommy?
I don't know where I was going earlier, but another thing I want to mention is if you have an apple orchard in between bedding and a field edge, they make really good transition areas, which we don't have that so much at Climber. Most of our apple trees are back into the woods,
Like right on the swamp.
right
Yeah.
on the edge of the swamp. But there is places that I hunt where it's bedding, apple orchard, field, and it's a transition area or staging area, whatever you want to call it. But those are really good spots for evening sits. Catch them, in daylight hours before they come out into the field.
Yeah, especially during the early season when they're using the bean fields, especially really heavy right before they turn brown and stuff. They usually flock to the fields in the early archery season. So if you can hit those transition areas early in archery season, you have a lot better chance of killing a deer rather than sitting on that field edge.
Yeah, you'll definitely more likely to get daylight visuals. What I was gonna say, backtracking a little bit, is when we were talking about how a lot of times crab apple patches are on the edge of swamps. And I forget who I was listening to, but it definitely correlates to this because they were saying when they are looking for scrapes, they don't really get too excited unless you see a scrape within 100 yards of bedding.
I was talking to you and Grandpa about that because Grandpa was telling us about all those scrapes that were on the edge of the corn
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, I think they're all nighttime scrapes because they're on the edge of the open field. And we got into that conversation with him for quite a while, and we're like, yeah, you're probably right. And
So yeah, if you have apple orchard right off the edge of bedding, a lot of scrape activity, likely you're going to have deer hitting those scrapes in daylight hours because they're comfortable going to them because they're so close to bedding.
we ought to get our buddy Keith back on for a scrape hunting episode, just because like Keith's killed a lot of bucks on scrapes, and that's one thing I use scrapes to pick out where I'm going to hunt, but I don't think I've ever killed like a target buck off of, like while he was laying a scrape, which Keith tends to do. That's like kind of his bread and butter during hunting season. So I have to get him on.
I had the opportunity to do that last year.
I mean, I've watched plenty of bucks tend a scrape that I was hunting, but I've never personally been lucky enough. Like, Dad last year, his buck he killed came right off the scrapes we located. And I haven't done it myself, but I'd like to talk to somebody that targets that. Like, I mean, Keith sets a lot of, because he hunts a lot of public ground or like knock on door permission property that he can't put food plots on.
Yeah.
So natural food sources is his bread and butter, and scrapes is also another thing he really targets in on.
I used to do that a lot a couple years ago up at our one property. That I almost exclusively hunted scrapes back. It was like right off the edge of an apple orchard, a crabapple orchard, way back in the woods. It was really far back, and I always had a camera on this one really big community scrape, and I found my target buck in a different place, but it was kind of on his path. I was like, I feel like he's probably going to be using this area and probably hitting the scrape, so I set up on it a lot, and I never got eyes on him. But like I said, I always had a camera on it, and the one day I was at work, actually, it was like noon, he came through and tended that scrape, and I never saw him again that year, and then I didn't get any visuals of him the next year until I got him tending another scrape about 20 yards from that one after archery season, actually, and then that was the buck Dave killed in rifle.
Oh, the
like
old
a
split tine buck, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a stud.
Yeah, it was in the 150s. It was a big deer.
Deal. The next early season food source that I just picked up on this last year is like if you have small like sapling maple trees, the leaves, for whatever reason, I don't know, I've never really heard anybody talking about it, but last year I really noticed maple leaves, for whatever reason, the deer love when they're, because it's kind of browse, but it's not, because I noticed they're targeting the maple trees. Because like you can watch a doe come through brush or something, and they're constantly eating things everywhere. But I watched several does and even small bucks hitting maple leaves, and not like dried up ones on the ground. Like if it was freshly fallen, they would eat it, but mostly green maple leaves were huge that I saw early season last year. I don't know. I just took note of it because like I noticed it was like the same tree was the first. It was like probably the second week into the season. I noticed that there was 3 or 4 doe at different times came to the same tree.
What kind of maple?
I don't know. I don't know my maple trees enough. I don't. But it was definitely a maple.
Yeah.
Is this out at the farm?
Yeah.
I know most of the maple trees out at the farm are, I don't know specifically, but they are soft maple.
Okay. So maybe that has something to do with it. But either way, like I watched at different times 3 or 4 different doe show up to that tree and eat leaves off of it. Like, so it wasn't like they were browsing around and happened to, like they would almost
target that tree.
Almost like an apple tree. That's what I noticed was like, holy shit, that's as if it were an apple tree. They were coming in and targeting maple leaves.
That's weird. I don't think I've ever really noticed that, but again, I haven't
You
really
don't think
paid
about it,
attention to it because that's not something that you typically think of, that the deer are going to come right to that.
Yeah. And I don't
Unless it's like an immature buck and you just planted that tree and he wants to rub the shit out of
yeah.
it and completely destroy it. They're pretty good at that.
So it was actually, I noticed it when the small food plot we have around an apple tree. So one of my top early season stands, there's 2 apple trees, and then we have a food plot around the bases of them. Well, I was noticing a lot of the action back in the woods earlier. I would see deer hour and a half, 2 hours before dark back in the woods, and they were hitting the same maple tree and eating there before they would make it out to the apple tree.
Yeah.
Because it was right on the edge of their bedding. So something I there was probably more deer that were doing it. I just didn't notice it, but it took a few of them, like watching the same trail, they'd stop, eat there, and continue. I was like, wow. Like,
Wonder what's going on over there.
Yeah, so
I wonder if it was more eating or like a community.
they were
scent checking?
I don't know. It looked like they were eating it. Like I could see green leaves just hanging. Because I had my binos. Like I was watching it like it was right in front of me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen that, but like we put that hinge cut in up
Yeah.
at the headquarters, and that creates a lot of browse, which I've had deer stand in one spot for like 20 minutes just eating every bud and leaf.
I think browse are like one of the most overlooked things when it comes to hunting. Like people, and we do it too, we spend a lot of time on food plots, but if you ever watch a deer walk through the woods, no matter where they are, their head is always turning, they're always chewing, they're always eating something, no matter what. So if you find a spot where there's certain things that they like, or just an abundance of browse, or like you said, we put the hinge cut in.
you can create an abundance of browse by putting in a hinge cut.
Yeah.
Which costs no more than
A couple
can
bucks
of
in
fuel.
gas. Yeah.
Yeah,
know,
if you have the chainsaw.
Yeah.
But last year I had a camera on our property that it just got logged before my dad bought it, and there was a fallen tree, and I actually screwed a camera to the tree, and it was just looking through like a lot of browse. And I had
I helped you hang that camera.
Yeah, tons of video of deer, like, and I could hear them just like chewing on stuff constantly. Every time they come through there, and like you could see it, like when you walk in, like everything was chewed out through there because they're just eating everything. Those little, I think it's called jewelweed. Deer love that for whatever reason. That's like, I don't know if you remember
the poppers.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. If you remember when you were little, you had those little pods that you'd pull off plants and poke them and they pop. It's jewelweed, and the deer love those too. I don't know why, but there's an abundance of it on our property, and the deer seem to love the leaves. So,
But go ahead. No, you
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say bless you to Frank, but it wasn't a sneeze.
Yeah, I was burping. My bad.
Go ahead, Tom.
I was just gonna get on to oak nuts and hazelnuts, chestnuts.
Are we gonna do this?
Do what?
Calling them oak nuts?
Yeah, oak nuts.
They look like a nut.
They are a nut.
Okay.
What's the difference between a nut and a corn?
Acorn. It's acorn.
Just one corn. What's the
Or
difference between a
acorns.
nut and
Right,
one
I
corn?
think it's an acorn.
Acorn.
Acorns, oak nuts, acorns, all the same thing.
Tomato, tomato.
But if you get a good acorn crop, and this has happened up at our big camp before, where it's useless hunting the food plots because, and I think we've touched on this before, but there's just so many acorns out in the woods that the deer feel no need to come out into the field before it gets dark.
Well, I think we have a special property there too that the entire timber is loaded with white oak.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't.
Yeah, you don't get that really around here.
No,
in most places.
anywhere really.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking a substantial chunk of timber.
Yeah.
That's acorns everywhere, and it's all white oak, which the deer prefer over the reds. In case you didn't know, but like Tom said, it was like marbles walking through the woods. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, you could roll an ankle walking on flat ground, tripping over acorns.
Like our tractor trails and stuff to get to the food plots in the timber, absolutely loaded. Like literally rolling ankles trying to walk around. It was ridiculous.
That's crazy.
And we totally abandoned food plots that year because it was.
And it's not that the
pointless.
deer weren't coming out to the fields or to the food plots. They weren't coming out during daylight hours. They would stage up in the acorns, stay there until well after dark, and then once it was dark, they'd feel comfortable to come out into the field. But I think they just figured, why go out into the field before dark when there's all this food right here?
I think acorns are overrated. You ever taste one? Tastes like shit.
Yeah, they're pretty nasty.
Yeah, but the deer seem to like them.
I don't know. If I don't like it,
Deer ain't gonna like
I'm not
it.
hunting it.
That's actually a good point.
Yeah.
Write that down.
But if you're lucky enough to have chestnuts, I read an article the other day, and I don't know how they figure this out, but they said deer prefer chestnuts over acorns 100 to 1.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty easy statistic to figure out.
They put 100 acorns out and one chestnut out and let a deer walk out there and pick.
I don't think that's not what I was going. You go
That's
pile of acorns,
does that not make
pile
sense?
of chestnuts, 100 deer get released,
Nope.
and only one of them went to the Acorns.
No.
But the
100
thing
acorns,
is,
1 chestnut.
I don't know where all of our listeners are hunting, but
In the
around
woods,
here,
typically.
we don't have very many chestnut trees.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're fortunate enough to have a chestnut tree, the deer are going to love it. And I highly suggest planting some chestnut trees, which we planted, I don't know, like 100 or so chestnut trees this year. And actually, they are, what's the terminology? They bear nuts relatively soon.
Their balls drop.
Yes, compared to the acorns.
Yeah.
I think it's
What-
like 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, it's not long. My dad's been talking about chestnut trees for a long
Like
time.
your
He's
dad
been,
was the one that turned us on to it.
Yeah,
It was
he's
like,
been all about chestnut trees for a long time, and he's been planting a lot of them all over the place. And yeah, they definitely. I think it is like 5 years that they will start bearing nuts.
Yeah,
that's
which
pretty neat.
Oak tree, it takes
Longer.
10 to 15 years before they're bearing nuts.
Yeah, so you get a lot more productivity a lot quicker out of the.
This is my ignorance. So acorns don't always, like, oak trees don't always produce acorns every year. Are chestnuts the same way, or do they produce every year?
I couldn't tell you. I don't
Okay.
know of a mature chestnut tree
To check.
that I've ever hunted.
Yeah, I don't really know of any mature chestnut
Yeah, 'cause
trees that I've
for-
hunted either.
You know how it is, like with oak trees. Like some years they produce, some years they don't.
And it's not that they
They don't.
Don't.
produce, it's that
Some
it's-
years are wildly better than others.
Yeah.
And it's
It's the
not
same
like,
with like apples. I'm sure. I would imagine it's the same with chestnuts.
I guess it
because
probably, yeah, because
pretty
apples,
much any tree is like that, or any plant. You know,
I
one
guess
year.
it's magnified with oak trees because there's so,
So
many
many.
nuts compared to apples.
Yeah, but like, look, if you look at like
Comparing
black walnut
it's not
trees,
like apples to oranges. It's more like apples to nuts.
exactly. But if you look at like black walnut trees, we have those all over the place.
Oh yeah.
And some years, because a lot of them are like along roads and stuff, people plant a lot of them by the roads for some reason. But like if you drive by a black chestnut or black walnut tree, like the road is completely covered in nuts some years, and then other years there'll be like 1 or 2.
Yeah.
So I'm sure it's
Put
that
on
way
a
with
golf course where they're right by the green, and boy was that fun.
yeah. But yeah, I would imagine it's the same way with chestnuts with any other tree.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Just up and down years.
One other, real quick here, overlooked food source that you can put on just about any property is,
Natural food sources, Tom.
yeah, that's what we're talking about.
You're just gonna naturally put it on your property,
All you got to do is mow a section of the field.
so it's already there.
It's already there. If you have a big high field and you mow a little section of it and get some new growth, the deer are going to be all over it.
New growth is a big one that is definitely overlooked big time. I mean, just after you mow, how often, like if you're mowing a big field or something, are deer out before you're even done?
I was gonna say along the same lines as that, like if you till a field, just turning up dirt, animals flock to it.
It releases nutrients.
Yeah, and it turns up bugs and different
Yeah.
stuff. So like a lot of like raccoons and possums and deer, everything smells that turned up dirt, and then they want to come to it. And it's the same way, like you said, with mowing. It has some new growth, and they just want to get after it.
Yeah, if you don't have the time or the equipment to put in a food plot, if you have a mower and just mow a section of high field and keep
Even
it
a weed
mowed,
whacker.
Yeah, weed whacker. It doesn't have to be a huge section, just even 20 yards by 20 yards is more than enough.
Because a lot of the stuff they like to eat is 2-3 inches tall, and when it grows up a foot, it's a lot of work to weed through all that high shit to get to what they want. So if you knock it down, that helps that smaller stuff flourish a little bit.
And that's actually one of the things Tom and I just did. One of our food plots with all this rain, got overrun by weeds. Tom and I cut it. Lo and behold, there's clover naturally in that field. We cut everything right down to the wood, or to the dirt, if you will, and there's a bunch of
the
clover.
clover's
So now
really
it's
taken off.
even though like the food plot wasn't supposed to be a clover food plot, it is now, and it is great.
Yeah.
So saved
So it works
ourselves
out
there.
good. And if you want to even make it better, you mow it a couple times and then spray it with, all you got to do is spray it with Post, throw a little fertilizer, a little bit of lime. Beautiful clover food plot.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah.
Can't
you don't
go
even need
wrong.
to seed. No. So that's about all I got for natural food sources.
One thing I don't have any experience with it. It's I read an article about it, and it's in swamps, and it's called duck potatoes. Now,
You were telling me about that
Yes.
last year, and I didn't read about it much, but
I did a ton of reading on it, and our swamps don't have duck potatoes.
Is it
But
more of a southern thing, western thing? Where
the article came out of like Wisconsin or Michigan, that
it's like,
area.
pretty much all we have in the swamp is like skunk cabbage.
Yeah.
Deer loves skunk cabbage.
Never seen that, actually.
Write an article about it, then you'll see it.
Anyways, so if anybody out there hunts an area where they have duck potatoes in their swamp, I really, really, really want to hear about it because I'm curious about planting it, honestly. Like, if there's a way to transplant it into our swamp. Because
it flourishes in really wet areas.
Yeah. I've read articles of deer literally, like, swimming out into 3-4 foot of water to get duck potatoes. So I really would like to talk to somebody
Is it
that knows
an
more.
aquatic plant?
I think so, kind of like dillweed or like what's the long?
Cattails.
No, it's not cattails. The shit that grows in the water.
Lily pads.
No,
Silly pads.
I don't know. Goofy pads. No, I don't know what they're called, but they're like it's got like little circular things that it like grows down the stem several times.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
I don't know what they're called.
I know. I can picture it. I don't know what it's called.
It's green.
Yeah. Sometimes.
But anyways, it's similar to that. And if you have any experience with it, message us or get a hold of us or whatever, because I want to talk to you about it. I'd like to learn more. And because I tried finding like where you could like buy it, and it's not a thing. Like it's always a natural food source, but I want to figure out if I could transplant it. Like if I happen to be somewhere where they were, if I found them, could I put it in a cooler, move it, and would it take off? So that's the only other natural food source I can think of offhand. Besides salt deposits, that's something.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing that like you just happen to have it or you don't.
Yeah, that's not something that you can plan for.
Yeah, our buddy Jared, who we should have on soon, he has a salt deposit in his yard, and for whatever reason, the deer just eat up the ground right in that area. It's a weird. I don't know. It's just the dirt is high in salt. I don't know how it happens.
Yeah.
Or if it's a common thing that other people have picked up on, but the spot never has grass because the deer are constantly digging at it. So I thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that is wild.
And then one more thing is it's not really food, but natural water sources. Early season water sources, it's almost as good as food. I've hunted several water sources. If you have little small ponds, creeks, anything like that, if you can find like if it's super hot, if you can hunt somewhere on water, it's a big one.
Yeah, definitely helps.
Yeah. Other than that is it.
Yeah, that about wraps it up for me. I've touched on the main things that I have experience with and that I hunt early in the season. I usually do that sort of stuff in like the mid-season, I would say. Like Tom was saying, hit the acorns and stuff mid-season. That's what I'm all about. But apples are great for the early season.
And they're pretty good. I like eating apples.
That's why earlier I said I don't hunt places if I don't like to eat it, because you got to have a snack when you go in your stand. So
I like eating soybeans, apples, pears.
I don't like soybeans. I've eaten soybeans out of the field. I don't like them.
Pretty good. I tell you what, this little side note, I got two little side stories. I was at one of them fancy Japanese steakhouses where they, throw the spatulas and the egg in his cook. Yeah. And they wanted a group we were with there was like a soybean like appetizer. Never had it before, but they ranted and raved about it. And I tell you what, wasn't good. It was like literally, it was okay, but it wasn't any better than the soybeans I eat out of the field. It was literally the whole pod, and then they were just like steamed with like salt on them. So you just like sucked a little bean out of them.
Yeah, that doesn't sound that spectacular.
Yeah, it wasn't that impressive. Tom tried eating the whole pod.
I thought they were sweet peas.
I love sweet peas.
They are good. These pods are much tougher than the pod of a sweet pea.
And then the other little side story is I saw a bald eagle this morning.
Oh yeah.
working on the farm. Yeah, it was pretty neat. It was
That's
huge.
funny you say that because DJ texted me when she was on her way to work and said that she had a bald eagle like flying above her car for like 4 miles on her way to work. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if it was the same one because probably not.
No, because she doesn't work in the area
Yeah.
anymore.
That's true. Anyways, yeah, I was actually feeding cows and whatnot, and on my way through, I was like, wow, that looks like a really big turkey out in that field. And then I was like, head kind of looks a little white. So I hopped on the old wheeler and drove over there and got a closer look, got to about like 150 yards, and I was like, definitely bald eagle. And then he or she took off, and just an incredible wingspan. Bald eagles, I don't think they get appreciated for how big they really are.
Yeah, they are big.
I mean, some of them have like over a 6-foot wingspan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's
they're
taller than
definitely a
me.
big bird. Get outside.
Get outside.